Hey everyone, good evening. The fans humming low in the background and the shadows in this room feel thicker than usual tonight. My laptop screen glows just enough to reflect in the window, and for a second it almost looks like there's another face staring back at me. I hate that, but I promised you all I'd tell this, and let's be honest, I probably won't make it out alive. So before we get too deep into this, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you actually like what I'm doing here. Also, humor me, drop your current location and time in the comments. If nothing else, it helps me feel less alone out here. Now, turn off the lights, switch on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin tonight's journey. The first thing I noticed was how quiet the forest had gotten. Not the usual kind of quiet where you can still hear branches shifting or an owl complaining. No, this was the kind of quiet that makes your ears buzz like the air's holding its breath. I'd been sitting outside the cabin sipping what was left of my lukewarm instant coffee when it happened. One sharp whistle. Long, then too short. I froze. My granddad used to say, when the woods stop talking, someone else is listening. He meant animals, of course, hunters, predators, but tonight that felt way too literal. Here's a weird fact for you: sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins. I'm serious, 40 minutes underwater. But me, I couldn't even hold mine for 10 seconds when that sound echoed again. I stood up fast, spilling the coffee, eyes darting toward the tree line. Nothing. Just that black wall of pines. Still, I couldn't shake it, the feeling that I wasn't alone. One-liner for you. If paranoia burned calories, I'd be shredded by now. I should have gone inside, locked the door, but something kept me rooted there, staring into the dark like an idiot. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of it, and when I glanced down, yeah, dumb move, something moved in the corner of my vision. It was quick, just a flicker between the trees, low to the ground like someone crawling. But when I looked again, gone. Another thing my granddad always said: curiosity's what gets cats killed, but people just call it bad luck. One more one-liner. If this were a horror movie, I'd already be dead. The whistle came a third time, closer now. My mouth went dry, and that's when I whispered, barely audible even to myself. This isn't normal. And here's the kicker. Just before I finally stepped back toward the cabin, something whispered back. Not a word, not even human, maybe just breath. A long exhale that felt like it came from right behind me. I didn't run, not yet, but I should have. One last random fact before we move on. The human body can sense when someone's staring even from behind, due to subtle changes in electromagnetic fields, or so a guy on a debate podcast insisted once. He said, "The science isn't settled, but honestly, tonight, I believe him." I shut the cabin door, bolted it, and sat in the dark for an hour listening. No more whistles, no more crawling shapes, just me breathing too fast. But I couldn't stop thinking about that exhale. And that's when I remembered the toothpaste incident. The toothpaste incident. I didn't think much about it when it happened, but looking back now, it feels like the first little crack in the wall. The first sign that someone or something had already been messing with me. So here's the deal: about 3 days before the whistles started, I woke up to find my toothpaste tube missing. Not empty, not just misplaced, gone. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. Big deal, dude. Maybe you forgot to pack it. But no. I'm obsessive about my stuff when I travel. The tube was there the night before. I'd left it on the tiny sink beside my toothbrush. When I first noticed, I actually laughed out loud. "Great," I muttered, either a toothpaste-stealing raccoon or early onset dementia. That was my first one-liner of the day. If I start blaming ghosts for dental hygiene problems, someone slap me. I checked every inch of the bathroom, floor sink, even the trash, thinking maybe I'd thrown it away, half asleep. Nothing. But here's where it got weird. Later that morning, I found it outside, propped neatly against the porch railing, cap twisted back on like someone wanted me to notice. Random fact for you: crows are known to leave gifts for people who feed them, like buttons or bottle caps. But I hadn't fed any crows, and toothpaste isn't exactly bird treasure. I remember just standing there staring at it, coffee steaming in my hand, thinking, who puts toothpaste outside? My neighbor back home, Mrs. Rinaldi, 84 years old, sharp as a hawk, always told me, when something's out of place, pay attention. Either you moved it or someone wants you to think you did. That rattled me more than I admitted at the time. I told myself it was just an animal messing around, but animals don't twist caps back on. Second one-liner of the morning. If this is raccoon work, someone give that thing a job in maintenance. I brought the tube back in, tossed it on the counter, and tried to brush it off, pun absolutely intended. But the rest of that day felt wrong. Like the forest was watching me. The stillness outside too heavy. Even the wind felt different, more deliberate somehow, like it was moving around me instead of through the trees. I went for a short hike to clear my head, sticking to the trail because you know I'm not that dumb. About a half-mile in, I noticed something new, a fresh shoe print in the mud. Too big to be mine, too small for a work boot, but definitely human. That's when the elder wisdom came creeping back. My granddad again. The forest remembers every footstep, even if you don't. Third one-liner. I came here for peace and quiet, not CSI Wilderness Edition. The rest of the hike was uneventful, but I couldn't shake the toothpaste thing. By evening, I had convinced myself it was all in my head until I saw the print again, this time closer to the cabin just off the porch. And here's the kicker, next to it was a drag mark, like someone had knelt down and leaned on the dirt with one hand. You ever get that full-body chill, the kind that makes your scalp tighten? That was me standing on the porch, staring at the ground like it might whisper an explanation. The sun was setting, turning the sky bruised purple, and for a second I thought I saw movement between the trees again, low, slow, deliberate. I almost called out, almost, but something in me said don't. So I stepped back inside, locked the door, and tried to convince myself I was overreacting. But that night, just before I drifted off, I swear I heard soft footsteps outside. Not running, not rushing, just pacing, back and forth. And when I finally dared to look out the window, I saw nothing but shadows. At least I think they were just shadows. The tracks in the mud. Morning always feels safer, doesn't it? Sunlight's like this cheap security blanket we wrap around ourselves, pretending monsters can't stand daylight. But that morning, the forest didn't care about pretending. I woke up stiff from a restless night, every creak of the cabin still rattling in my head. My first instinct was to check outside, even though I told myself I wouldn't. And yeah, bad idea. The mud near the porch was worse than yesterday, more prints clearer this time. Whoever it was hadn't even tried to hide them. The tracks were spaced weirdly though, like whoever left them had a limp. Left foot, normal, right foot, dragging slightly, heel barely touching the ground. One-liner. Nothing says, "Welcome to the neighborhood," like fresh stalker footprints. I crouched down, squinting at the edges of the print. There was something strange, indentations near the toes, like whoever it was had crouched too, maybe leaning in close to the dirt, maybe watching me sleep through the window. My stomach turned. Elder wisdom popped into my head. Uninvited Mr. Carlson, the retired park ranger who lived near my parents, used to say, "Tracks aren't just where someone's been. They're where they stopped." And this guy had definitely stopped. Weird fact of the day. Did you know that ancient hunters could track people by the way they shifted weight in their footprints? There's even a debate in anthropology circles. Some argue trained trackers can identify a person's mood just by their stride. If that's true, then the mood here, patient, calm. Way too calm for someone sneaking around a stranger's cabin. I followed the tracks, heart pounding, moving slow enough to hear every crunch of frost under my boots. The trail didn't lead far, maybe 30 feet into the trees before circling back toward the cabin, over and over, like they'd been pacing. One-liner, to congratulations, stranger. You've officially joined the ranks of creepiest exes I've never had. I stood there staring at the loops in the mud, trying to figure out why anyone would circle a cabin at night when I noticed something else. Not far from the prints, half buried in wet leaves, was a small wooden figure, roughly carved maybe with a pocket knife. It looked like a little girl. Pigtails, no face, just grooves where eyes should be. I didn't touch it. I don't know why, but touching it felt like crossing a line, like whoever left it wanted me to. That's when I heard it snap, a branch not far off. I froze. The forest was quiet otherwise. No birds, no squirrels, just me and that single sharp sound. Elder wisdom again, courtesy of my granddad. If the woods give you one warning, don't wait for the second. Third one-liner. I might be stupid, but I'm not die in Act 1 stupid. I backed away slowly, eyes locked on the tree line, but nothing moved. Still, I swear I felt eyes on me, watching every step back to the porch. Inside the cabin, I shoved a chair under the doorknob. Yeah, cliché, but it made me feel better. I sat by the window for hours after that, just watching, waiting for any movement. None came. Not until just after sunset. That's when I saw them new prints forming in the mud. Not in real time, of course, but they hadn't been there an hour before. And now fresh, crisp, perfectly spaced. Whoever it was had been right there again. And this time the tracks didn't circle. They stopped. Dead center of the porch, right in front of the door. I didn't sleep that night. The old man's warning. I didn't plan on leaving the cabin that next morning. But you know how curiosity works. It's like an itch you can't stop scratching even when it hurts. So yeah, I packed my little day bag, slung my camera around my neck, and stepped outside like an idiot who hadn't just spent the night staring at porch prints. The tracks were still there, sunken deep in the damp mud, and now that daylight hit them, they looked fresher. I crouched down and traced one with my finger, not touching, but close enough to feel how crisp the edges were. No smudging from rain or wind. Whoever had been here wasn't just close, they were recent. One-liner. Nothing screams self-care like tracking a stalker before breakfast. I headed down the trail anyway, figuring if someone wanted to mess with me, they'd already had the chance. The air felt weirdly heavy that morning, like the forest itself was pushing back, trying to keep me from going further. Half a mile in, that's when I saw him. The guy looked ancient, lean, wiry, dressed in a faded plaid jacket patched at the elbows. His beard was this wild silver mess that looked like it had caught half the forest in it. He was leaning on a walking stick, just standing in the middle of the trail like he'd been waiting for me. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. He squinted at me, then shook his head slowly. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was gravel low and sure, the kind of voice that belongs to someone who's seen too much. I laughed nervously. I rented the cabin for a week, paid in full, not leaving early because of some squirrels. He didn't smile. "Ain't squirrels. Elder wisdom time." He tilted his head and said, "The woods keep secrets, son, and the ones who don't want to be found, they don't take kindly to being looked for." I tried to joke it off, second one-liner, great love a vacation where the locals speak in cryptic horror movie riddles, but the old man didn't budge. He jabbed his walking stick into the dirt near my feet, tracing a crooked circle. "You find anything strange by your cabin?" I hesitated. "Maybe." "Figures." He pointed to the ground. "They're pacing you, testing, seeing how close they can get before you notice. Once they know you're paying attention." He paused, looking past me into the trees. "Well, that's when things get worse." A random fact bubbled up in my brain because that's what my nervous system does in moments like this. Did you know ravens can mimic human voices? Some people even report hearing their own name whispered in the woods only to find it's a bird. I hope to God that's all my whispers had been. I cleared my throat. You live around here? He didn't answer right away, just stared down the trail before finally muttering, lived. Not anymore. Third one-liner, note to self. When someone talks in past tense about being alive, leave. But I didn't leave. Not yet. The old man sighed, shifting his weight. If you see carved figures, don't touch them. If you hear laughing, don't follow. And if you hear whistling, pray it ain't for you. My stomach nodded. He started to walk past me, slow and deliberate, when I blurted, "Who are they?" He glanced back, and for the first time his face softened, sad, almost apologetic. "You'll know soon enough." Then he kept walking, vanishing into the trees without another word. I stood there for a long minute, heart-pounding, before finally turning back toward the cabin. But as I walked, I couldn't shake it, the feeling that someone else had been listening to that entire conversation. Halfway back, I heard it again. A whistle. Long, then too short. The old man hadn't even made it out of earshot yet, and that was the first time I truly felt scared. The camera that shouldn't work. By the time I got back to the cabin, my hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my keys twice. The old man's words replayed in my head over and over like a bad song stuck on repeat. If you hear whistling, pray, it ain't for you. And here's the messed up part, I could still hear it. Not constantly, but faintly, like an echo that wouldn't quit. I needed a distraction, so I grabbed my camera, figuring I'd do what I came out here for in the first place. Take nature shots, pretend to be a normal human being for 5 minutes. I hiked out again this time, along a ridge trail maybe a quarter-mile from the cabin. That's when I saw it tied high in a pine tree camouflaged with leaves, and sap was a trail camera. Now cameras in the woods aren't unusual. Hunters, rangers, even bird nerds use them. But this one, it was old. Cracked casing, sun-bleached plastic, a brand I hadn't seen in years. And yet, the tiny red indicator light was blinking. One-liner. Nothing creepy about a zombie camera that refuses to die. I pulled my phone out, took a picture, then hesitated. The old man's warning flashed through my head. But curiosity. Yeah, it won. The strap was weathered, but it slid loose easy enough. I climbed down with it, wiped away some dirt, and popped the hatch. The batteries inside corroded, white crust everywhere. No way this thing should have been running. Random fact for you, this is real, by the way. Archaeologists found batteries from the 1800s in Baghdad that still held a tiny charge. So maybe, but I doubt whoever stuck this here was an ancient Mesopotamian scientist. Back at the cabin, I hooked the camera to my laptop. The files were weirdly labeled, dates out of order, some repeating twice. I clicked the most recent one. At first, it was just trees swaying, sun flickering through branches. Then movement. Not animals. A figure crouched low between the pines, partially turned toward the camera. Thin. Wrongly proportioned, like they were leaning too far forward to balance properly. Their face blurred but pale. And they weren't moving naturally. They were waiting. Elder wisdom moment. Mrs. Rinaldi used to say, "Stillness is louder than motion. Anything that waits too long wants something." Second one-liner. Congratulations to my anxiety for leveling up to wildlife cameraman. I clicked through the next few files. More trees. More stillness. And then, this is where my stomach turned at 3:02 a.m. Exactly, the figure moved closer, right toward the camera. The footage cut out as they reached for it. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to breathe slow, when I heard something behind me. Not inside the cabin, outside. I turned the laptop volume down and held my breath. There it was again, the whistle. Long. Too short. Closer now. I peeked through the blinds. Nothing but trees swaying in the dusk. But then my eyes caught something else movement on the far edge of the porch. A small wooden figure. Another one, placed neatly by the door. Third one-liner. Guess I'm officially in a pen-pal relationship with my local psychopath. I didn't touch it. Not this time. Instead, I kept my back to the wall and waited until dark, watching through the window until the forest swallowed every bit of light. No more whistles, no more movement, just silence. I finally sat back down, staring at the last frozen frame on the laptop. Someone crouched low, reaching for the camera. And here's the part I can't explain. Just as they moved closer, their head tilted. And for a split second, I swear, they looked straight into the lens. Straight at me. The laughter at 3 a.m. I've always hated that particular hour of the night. 3 a.m., the so-called witching hour. Too late to be night, too early to be morning. The time when even the forest seems to forget how to breathe. That's when it happened. I hadn't slept. Not really. I'd been sitting cross-legged on the cabin floor, laptop closed, camera shoved into my backpack, like ignoring it would somehow undo what I'd seen. The only light came from the moon cutting sharp angles through the window. Then clear as day I heard it. Laughter. Soft, high-pitched, and wrong. Like a kid trying to mimic laughter without knowing what it really feels like. It floated just outside the cabin, slow and spaced, as if whoever was laughing was walking past my windows on purpose. One-liner. Nothing like creepy giggles to make you question every life choice that led you here. I froze, heart thundering. My brain screamed to stay put, but another part of me, stupid curiosity again, was already reaching for my recorder. If I was going to die out here, at least the internet would know why. Elder wisdom time, my granddad again. The only thing louder than fear is silence after it. I pressed record, whispering into the mic. If you're hearing this, I'm about to make a bad decision. Slipping my boots on, I cracked the door slowly, wincing as it groaned. The laughter stopped immediately, dead quiet. And still I stepped outside. The air was sharp and cold, stinging my nose. I clicked my flashlight on, keeping it low, sweeping across the dirt. Fresh footprints, small, bare, and oddly deep, like whoever made them had been standing in one place for a long time. Random fact of the night, human toes can curl in ways that leave claw-like impressions when gripping dirt. Survivalists do it for traction. But these looked more like someone afraid of being pulled away. I followed the prints slowly, recorder still running. 100 feet from the cabin just beyond the tree line, I heard it again. The laughter, this time closer, sharper, like whoever it was wanted me to follow. Second one-liner. If I die chasing giggles in the woods, delete my browser history, please. I pushed deeper into the trees, careful with each step, the flashlight beam cutting thin slices into the darkness. Then, as suddenly as it started, the laughter stopped. My breathing felt too loud. And that's when I saw it, a crude shelter made of branches and tarp, half collapsed against a thick pine. Inside, I could just make out shapes. Carved wooden figures again, dozens of them scattered like they'd been tossed. I crouched low, shining the light across the dirt. More footprints this time, 2 sets, one larger, one smaller, both leading deeper into the forest. Elder wisdom, courtesy of Mrs. Rinaldi. Never follow a trail someone wants you to find. The real one is the one they hide. But there I was, ignoring her advice. I took one step forward, then another. That's when a branch cracked behind me. Not a head behind. My flashlight jerked back toward the cabin path, but there was nothing, just still trees. Third one-liner. Plot twist. Maybe I'm the idiot in someone else's horror story. I turned back toward the shelter, heart hammering, but now something was different. The carved figures had been rearranged. I swear to you, I hadn't taken my eyes off them for more than 2 seconds. But now they were lined neatly in a row, all facing me. And just before I bolted, I heard it again, soft, right by my ear this time. A laugh. I ran. Didn't stop until I slammed the cabin door shut, chest heaving, recorder still clutched tight in my hand. When I played the audio back later, just before the laughter, there was a single whispered word. Hello. Dead Timber Hollow. The morning after the laughter incident, I woke up, or rather, I gave up pretending to sleep, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head throbbed from staying up all night replaying that recording. The word hello still clung to me, echoing in my chest like an aftershock. But curiosity's a stubborn parasite, and it was already gnawing at me. That shelter I found. It wasn't random. The footprints led somewhere, and I couldn't just sit here and wait for the next gift to show up on my porch. So yeah, I packed up early. Water bottle, recorder, and for once I actually grabbed the old hunting knife my dad insisted I bring just in case. Spoiler, I have no idea how to use it. One-liner. Nothing like arming yourself with false confidence and dull steel. The trail back to the shelter felt heavier in daylight, like the trees had been rearranged overnight. They hadn't, obviously, but tell that to my brain. When I reached the collapsed tarp, everything was exactly where I left it, except the row of carved figures was gone. Gone. I crouched low, scanning the dirt. New footprints again. Same dragging right foot as before, leading away from the shelter deeper into the forest. Elder wisdom popped into my head this time from a guy named Mac, a survival instructor I once interviewed for a podcast episode. He said, if you're scared of getting lost, follow water. If you're scared of being found, stay above it. And the prints? They stayed high, avoiding the slope toward the stream. Deliberate. Random fact time. There's an old debate among wildlife trackers about whether some animals intentionally lay false trails. Wolves, for instance, have been observed doubling back on their own prints to confuse predators. People do it too. The question is, why would this guy want me to follow if he's covering tracks everywhere else? The footprints eventually veered left toward a steep ridge. That's when I saw it carved into a tree trunk, 2 crude X's stacked like eyes. Not initials, not random. A marker. I kept going because apparently I have zero survival instincts. The forest shifted here, growing denser, the air colder, as if I'd crossed into some invisible border. And then, sudden quiet. One-liner. 2. Fun fact silence. This thick should come with a panic attack warning label. That's when I stumbled into it. Dead Timber Hollow. I didn't know the name then, of course, but I'd heard enough local chatter on my trip into town to recognize the description later. It's this weird natural bowl in the land, a ravine smothered by pine so thick sunlight barely filters through. People avoid it too steep, too eerie, and according to legend, not right. The hollow floor was littered with old campfire rings and abandoned gear, rusted tins, a torn sleeping bag, even an overturned chair. But it wasn't the junk that got me. It was the wooden figures, dozens of them all arranged in a perfect circle facing inward. Elder wisdom, again this time from the old man on the trail. The ones who don't want to be found. They leave signs for themselves, not for you. My stomach twisted. I stepped carefully into the circle recorder running. Then I noticed something even worse. A tarp. Not old, not torn. A fresh green tarp stretched between 2 pines, almost blending perfectly with the moss. But here's the thing, yesterday, from where I stood I could see it. Today, nothing. Like someone had taken it down and put it back up only after I left. Second one-liner. It's comforting to know I'm not just being stalked, I'm being curated. I crouched, reaching toward one of the wooden figures, then stopped myself. Rinaldi's voice again. Don't touch what doesn't belong to you in the woods, especially if it's smiling. And yeah, this one was smiling, Not carved well, just two jagged grooves for a mouth, but it grinned like it knew something I didn't. I stepped back, heart hammering. That's when a sound drifted through the hollow. Not laughter, not whistling, breathing. Slow, steady breathing from somewhere just beyond the circle. Third one-liner, "Oh, great haunted yoga retreat, my favorite." I turned slowly, shining my light toward the sound, but all I caught was the faintest movement, branches swaying too low to be wind. And then the breathing stopped. I stayed frozen for what felt like forever before finally backing out of the hollow, recorder still clutched tight. But as I climbed the ridge, just before I left that strange bowl of silence, I heard something else. A voice. It whispered my name. The man with the limp. Hearing your own name whispered in the woods. That's a new kind of terror, one that sinks in slow like ice water, filling your veins. By the time I scrambled back to the ridge trail, my breathing was sharp and uneven, every step feeling like I was dragging invisible weights. Back at the cabin, I locked everything, the door, the windows, even shoved my backpack against the back door, as if that would help. But locking myself in didn't stop the thought from gnawing at me. Who knew my name out here? One-liner. When the forest starts calling you by name, it's time to cancel your vacation. I spent the rest of the afternoon sitting by the window with my recorder playing back every second of the hollow. Sure enough, right after the faint breathing there, it was a clear, drawn-out whisper, Eli. Yeah, that's me. Eli. I tried convincing myself it was just wind manipulation. But let's be real, the forest doesn't suddenly pick up pronunciation skills overnight. By early evening, I'd worked up the courage or stupidity to step outside again. Something in me had shifted. I couldn't just sit there anymore. If someone was circling me like prey, I needed to see them first. Elder wisdom. Courtesy of my dad this time. Fear doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you still. So I moved. I followed the same path as before, this time cutting off the main trail where I'd seen the strange double X carving. The air felt heavier again, like the forest itself was leaning closer, listening. About 20 minutes in, I heard it, a distinct crunch of leaves ahead. Someone was there. I ducked low, moving slow. The sound came again, closer now. My pulse pounded so loud I thought it might give me away. Random fact. According to studies, humans can subconsciously recognize familiar walking patterns by sound alone. But this one, I didn't recognize it, and yet it felt wrong. The steps were uneven. Left foot, normal weight. Right foot, dragging. The same limp from the prints. I froze behind a tree holding my breath, and that's when I saw him. At first, just a shadow between the pines, moving slow, careful. Then a glimpse of his shape, tall, too thin clothes hanging loose like he'd been wearing them for weeks. His head tilted slightly downward, scanning the ground as if he was following my tracks now. One-liner 2. Nothing boosts self-esteem like being the guest of honor at your own manhunt. He stopped, suddenly crouching to examine something. His face stayed hidden beneath a hood, but I caught a flash of his leg as he shifted. The limp was real. His right pant leg looked stiff, darker in spots, maybe stained or patched. I pressed against the tree, barely daring to breathe. Then slowly he turned his head. Not all the way, but enough for me to feel it. He was looking straight in my direction. Elder wisdom moment straight from the old man on the trail. Animals look past you when they're curious. People stare right through you when they already know you're there. And that's what he did. Stared through me like he'd been expecting me to be right there all along. Third one-liner, I wanted to play hide and seek, not starring role in a survival documentary. We stayed frozen like that for what felt like hours. Him crouched me, pressed flat against bark. Finally, he stood slow and deliberate and turned away, dragging that limp as he continued along the trail. I didn't move until I couldn't hear him anymore, and even then I didn't follow. Not that time, because as he disappeared deeper into the trees, I saw something that kept me rooted to the spot. A small wooden figure left carefully on a stump. This one wasn't just a faceless doll, though. This one had my name carved into it. A whispered name. I didn't bring the wooden figure back to the cabin. No way. The second I saw my name carved into that little block of wood, I backed away like it was radioactive. I left it sitting there on that stump, glaring at me with its crude, gouged-out smile. Back at the cabin, I sat in the dark with my recorder clutched tight, replaying everything in my head. Whoever he wasn't just wandering aimlessly, he knew me. Or at least he wanted me to think he did. One-liner. Nothing screams hospitality like personalized death threats in arts and crafts form. I couldn't shake the feeling he'd placed that doll just for me to find, like he was testing how far I'd go. But something else started gnawing at me too, what the old man had said. The ones who don't want to be found. They leave signs for themselves, not for you. So who was he leaving this sign for? The answer came that night. I'd finally dozed off at the table recorder still running, when a noise snapped me awake, a soft shuffle outside the window, followed by something else. A voice. Not his. A child's whisper, barely audible through the thin walls, but my recorder caught it perfectly when I played it back later. 3 syllables. Lee. Nah. I played it over and over again, until the word stopped sounding like a word at all, but there was no mistaking it, Lena. Elder wisdom courtesy of Mrs. Rinaldi again. Names are power, kid. Say the wrong one too loud, and sometimes it answers back. Random fact for you. Anthropologists argue whether hearing your name in a crowd triggers a stronger adrenaline spike than any other word. Apparently, our brains are hardwired to treat it as danger or salvation depending on tone. This one, definitely danger. Second one-liner. Nothing says, sleep tight, like ghost kids whispering random names outside your window. I waited in the dark for hours, holding my breath every time the wind shifted, but no more voices came. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know who Lena was. So yeah, I broke my own rule and went back out. The trail was quieter than usual, almost too quiet. The trees felt heavier, leaning in as if they wanted to listen. I followed the ridge past Dead Timber Hollow this time, careful to avoid the old prints. And then I heard a faint murmur ahead like 2 voices talking low. I crept closer, staying low behind a cluster of pines, and that's when I saw him again. The man with the limp. But he wasn't alone. He was crouched low, whispering to someone just out of my line of sight. I shifted, trying to catch a better angle, and that's when I saw it, a small figure sitting cross-legged on the ground. A kid. Her hair was tangled, hanging in her face, but she sat unnervingly still, head tilted slightly like she was listening too closely. He said something I couldn't catch, and then, as if she'd heard me instead of him, the girl's head snapped up. Our eyes met. For a second, I couldn't move. Her face was pale, hollow-eyed, and when her lips parted, I swear I heard it soft and clear carried on the breeze. Lena. Third one-liner. Great. So now I'm on a first-name basis with the local creep cult. The man jerked his head in my direction, his posture stiffening. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran, stumbling back toward the cabin, heart-hammering branches tearing at my jacket. And as I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it twice, I realized something terrifying. The girl hadn't been calling out to him. She'd been calling out to warn me. The cabin in the cliff. I didn't sleep after that. Every creak, every shifting shadow outside the cabin walls made my heart jump. The girl's face, hollow eyes, tangled hair, the way her lips had shaped that single word, Lena, stuck in my mind like a brand. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. Running wasn't going to help. Lena, whoever she was, clearly wasn't some random camper lost in the woods. And that man, the one with the limp, wasn't just wandering aimlessly. Elder wisdom, courtesy of my granddad. You can't outwalk a storm if it's following you. So instead of packing up and leaving, I followed the storm. One-liner. You ever make a decision so bad you narrate it for future investigators? Yeah, that's me now. I packed light water recorder and a flashlight this time. My phone battery was down to 38%, but at least I could still snap photos if things got bad. The trail past Dead Timber Hollow twisted upward into rocky terrain, harder to navigate, almost deliberately designed to break ankles. But there were signs, subtle ones, like broken branches that hadn't fallen naturally and a set of stacked stones arranged too neatly to be random. And then I found it. Nestled into the cliffside like it had grown, there was a cabin. Not a modern one either. The wood was gray and splintered, the roof sagging where it pressed into the rock face. Half of it was camouflaged by moss and brush. If you didn't know to look, you'd never see it. I hesitated at the door. It hung crooked on rusty hinges, a padlock dangling open like someone wanted me to think I'd gotten lucky. Random fact for you. There's a long-standing debate in criminology circles about whether hiding in plain sight works better than staying completely off the grid. Most experts say blending in is safer unless you're inviting people to find you. And this felt like an invitation. Second one-liner. Nothing screams, "Do not enter," like a free welcome mat in the middle of a crime scene. Still, I pushed the door open. The smell hit first damp wood mildew and something else. Something sour, like old sweat soaked into fabric. The inside was bare mostly. A cot shoved against the far wall, a broken chair, and stacks of wooden figures piled in the corner like discarded toys. But what made me freeze wasn't the figures. It was the crate. Sitting dead center of the room, a wooden crate covered in scratches. Some were random gouges, but others formed words messy and looping. I knelt, brushing dust off the top, and read the clearest one. The mountains took my daughters. Now they've given me new ones. My stomach dropped. Elder wisdom again. Mrs. Rinaldi, her voice sharp in my head. People who justify their madness don't stop. They escalate. I lifted the lid, half expecting something to jump out. Inside were notebooks, thin, leather-bound, filled with cramped handwriting. I flipped one open and my heart sank. Dates, names, drawings of little girls, stick figures with braids and hollow eyes. Some names were scratched out, others circled. One stood out, Lena. Third, one-liner. Nothing like finding your stalker's diary to really ruin your appetite. I snapped photos with my phone hands, shaking so badly the images blurred. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate crunching against the rocky soil just outside the cabin. I killed my flashlight, holding my breath. The steps grew louder, closer, and then clear as day. A voice. Not the man's. A girl's. Eli. I spun toward the doorway, pulse racing. But instead of a shadow or a figure, I saw something worse. The wooden figures in the corner had been rearranged. They were all facing the door now, facing me. And then just before I bolted, I heard her again whispering from the doorway. Don't stay. The green roof. I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted out of that cliffside cabin so fast I nearly twisted my ankle on the uneven rocks. The girl's whisper, "Don't stay," kept echoing in my head like a warning alarm. By the time I made it back to the main trail, I was drenched in sweat despite the cold. Every tree felt closer, every branch seemed to creak louder like the forest itself was following me. One-liner, if cardio didn't kill me before panic running through Murder Woods will. I made it back to the cabin, slammed, the door locked. It then shoved a chair under the knob for good measure. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat reviewing every photo I'd taken of the notebooks from that cliff cabin. Most of the names were scratched out, but one kept showing up circled multiple times, Lena. And then on one page, I noticed something else scribbled in sloppy block letters, almost childlike green roof. At first, I thought it was random, but then I remembered something from an old missing persons thread I'd read months ago while researching this trip. One of the survivors, a little girl from another case, had mentioned being held in a house with a green roof. Authorities had written it off as kid confusion, saying maybe she'd just seen moss. Elder wisdom, courtesy of Mac, the survival instructor. If kids keep repeating something, it's not imagination, it's memory. So yeah, the next morning, I packed up again. Not because I wanted to, but because now I couldn't stop thinking about it. The search took hours. I hiked past Dead Timber Hollow farther than I'd gone before, following faint trails and odd markers, stacked stones, carved X's, even sticks bent into crude arrows pointing up ridges. Random fact time. Some indigenous trackers used to leave directional signs, only visible from certain angles, a method called ghost pathing. The ones I found felt similar, deliberately hidden, unless you were looking. And then I saw it. Through the thick trees, barely visible in the dappled sunlight, was a roof, a green roof. Second one-liner. And here I thought Airbnbs had strict cleaning policies. I crouched low, moving carefully. The cabin, or house, whatever it was, sat in a clearing partially swallowed by vines and moss. The green wasn't paint. It was metal roofing, aged and weathered to an unnatural hue. It looked abandoned, but there were signs of life. A rope line stretched from the porch to a nearby tree hung with damp clothing. Kids' clothing. I crept closer, staying to the shadows, heart pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear it. That's when I noticed the toys. Scattered near the porch were little things, a faded stuffed bear missing an eye, a plastic truck half buried in dirt, and strangest of all, a row of smooth river stones painted with crude smiley faces. Elder wisdom, courtesy of Mrs. Rinaldi. Children leave their joy where they feel safe. Adults leave their lies where they don't. So whose joy was this? I took out my recorder, whispering into it. Green roof confirmed. Signs of kids. No visible movement yet. But even as I said it, I felt eyes on me. Third one-liner. Nothing boosts paranoia like narrating your own potential murder. I stayed crouched, waiting, scanning every shadow. Then from somewhere inside the house I heard a soft giggle. Not the creepy, hollow laughter from before. This one sounded real, like an actual child. And then a voice muffled but clear. Lena says, "We have to be quiet." My blood ran cold. Before I could move, the front door creaked open just a sliver. A pair of small hands appeared, gripping the frame. Then a face peeked out. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, with tangled hair and wide, hollow eyes. She looked straight at me and whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Go." 7 heat signatures. I didn't go. Not immediately anyway. Call it stupidity, call it morbid curiosity, but when a terrified kid whispers at you to leave, your brain freezes somewhere between run and what if I can help, one-liner. Apparently my fight or flight response has a third option. Bad decisions. The girl stayed in the doorway for only a second longer before vanishing back inside. The door clicked shut so softly it felt rehearsed, like they'd practiced this. I crouched lower, heart pounding, trying to process what I'd just seen. Kids. Multiple, if that muffled giggle and the voice mentioning Lena were anything to go by. Elder wisdom, courtesy of Mac, the survival guy. If you stumble onto a camp you weren't invited to, you're already in danger. I backed away slowly, keeping to the trees, every step careful. By the time I was out of sight of the clearing, My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped my recorder. Back at the cabin, I decided I needed proof. Something better than a blurry photo or a half-coherent audio file. That's when I remembered the old trail camera I'd found, the one with the impossible blinking light. So yeah, I borrowed its memory card, shoved it into my laptop, and started combing through the files again. That's when an idea hit me. If they were still out there moving between cabins like this, they might show up on infrared. Random fact time. Thermal imaging cameras can pick up heat signatures through light foliage, though dense pine canopy usually blocks most signals. But if I could get high ground, maybe. So I hiked. Again. This time I took the steep ridge trail just above Dead Timber Hollow, where the tree cover thinned enough to see across the valley. The air was colder up there, sharper biting at my lungs with every step. And yes, I'd packed a cheap drone. Not great, but it had a basic thermal attachment I'd bought for wildlife photography months ago. Never thought I'd be using it for this. One-liner 2. Nothing says outdoorsy influencer like accidentally becoming a missing persons investigator. I launched the drone just before sunset, watching on my phone screen as it skimmed the treetops, red and orange blotches flashing where birds nested or where deer moved through underbrush. For 10 minutes, nothing unusual. Then at 6:12 p.m., 7 distinct human-shaped heat signatures appeared on the screen. 7. They were clustered tightly together in a small clearing just beyond the green-roofed cabin, almost directly under a thick pine canopy. My breath caught. I zoomed in, but the resolution was garbage at that distance, just vague silhouettes. Still, I could tell by their size, 5 smaller, 2 larger. One of the taller ones moved differently than the other, its head snapping up like it had heard the drone. And here's the kicker. It turned directly toward the camera. For a long second, the taller figure didn't move, just stared. Then it reached up, gesturing, and the heat signatures shifted, scattering under the trees, until only 2 remained visible. Then they blinked out completely. Elder wisdom, courtesy of my granddad. If something disappears faster than it should, it wasn't hiding from you. It was waiting for you. Third one-liner. So, yeah, apparently I'm playing hide-and-seek with a survivalist cult. I kept the drone circling, but the heat signatures never came back. 10 minutes later, the battery dipped into red, and I had to bring it down. The second I landed it, I heard movement on the ridge below, a single sharp snap of a branch. I crouched low, scanning the trees. And then I saw him. The man with the limp halfway up the trail, staring straight at me. No hood this time. His face was pale, gaunt eyes, dark and sunken. And when he saw me freeze, he smiled slowly, deliberately. Then he raised one hand and pointed back toward the valley, toward the green roof. And that's when I realized something chilling. He wasn't warning me to stay away. He was inviting me to come closer. The woman called Lena. I didn't follow him immediately. Standing there on that ridge, staring down at the man with the limp, I felt my stomach twist. That smile, the slow, deliberate one, wasn't welcoming. It was calculated, like a fisherman lowering a net. One-liner. If Danger had Yelp reviews, this guy would have 5 stars for presentation. But curiosity, that stubborn parasite, wouldn't shut up. 7 heat signatures, kids, a green roof. And now this guy literally pointing me toward it, elder wisdom, courtesy of my granddad. The worst traps are the ones that look like choices. So yeah, I went. I trailed him from a distance, staying as quiet as I could, heart hammering so loud I swore he could hear it. He didn't move fast even with that limp, but his pace was steady, purposeful, like he knew I'd follow. The sun was setting by the time we reached the clearing near the green-roofed cabin. The air felt heavier here, colder somehow, like the forest itself was holding its breath. He stopped just at the edge of the clearing, turning his head slightly toward me, though he didn't make eye contact. Instead, he crouched low, almost bowing his head, as if waiting for someone else to arrive. And then she stepped out. Lena. I knew it was her instantly, not because anyone introduced us, but because every nerve in my body screamed it. She was taller than I expected, with long dark hair tied back in a messy braid. Her clothes were worn military-style jacket, cargo pants, but neat like she cared about order. Her face was striking sharp, but her eyes were the kind you don't forget. Not wild, not crazed, calm, too calm, like a predator waiting to decide whether you're prey. Random fact for you. There's a psychological debate about whether calm under extreme stress is learned or innate. Looking at her, I'd bet on innate. The kids appeared next, 5 of them slipping out from behind the cabin like shadows. They stayed close to her, clustering around her legs. And that's when something even stranger happened. She looked directly at me, not past me, not around me, straight into my eyes like she'd known I was there all along. Second one-liner. If she blinks twice, I'm leaving. Cult leaders give me hives. The man with the limp stayed crouched, almost submissive. His head bowed like he was waiting for her approval. Then Lena smiled. Not kindly, not threateningly, just knowingly. She raised one hand palm outward, a silent signal for me to stay put. And I did, because every instinct I had screamed that moving closer would be a mistake. Elder wisdom again. Mrs. Rinaldi, sharp as ever. When someone looks at you like they already know what you'll do next, change your plan. The kids whispered among themselves, their voices too soft to make out. But I caught one word clearly. Special. Lena crouched, touching the youngest girl's hair, then turned back to me. Her smile widened, just slightly, and for a terrifying second she tilted her head the exact same way the girl in the woods had when she whispered my name. Third one-liner. Congrats, Eli. You're officially the main character in a cult recruitment video. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, Lena stood motion to the kids and turned toward the deeper forest. They followed without a sound. The man with the limp lingered, glancing back at me once before limping after them. And just like that, they were gone. No words exchanged, no threats. Just an unspoken message hanging in the air. They'd let me see them because they wanted me to. And as I stood there frozen, heart still pounding, one thought slammed into me harder than all the others. If they were letting me see them now, what were they planning to show me next? The trail that ends in silence. The forest felt different after they disappeared. Not empty, just still, like the trees were holding onto their breath, waiting for me to do something. My own breathing sounded too loud, too fast, like I was trespassing in a place that didn't belong to me anymore. One-liner. The woods aren't quiet because you're safe. They're quiet because you're not supposed to be there. I should have gone back to the cabin. Hell, I should have packed up and driven until the road turned into something familiar again. But instead, I followed. Elder wisdom, courtesy of Mac, the survival guy. If you're tracking someone who wants you to follow, you're not tracking them. You're walking into a story they wrote for you. And yeah, I knew that. But I still stepped forward. The trail was fresh, dragged footprints from the man with the limp, lighter ones from the kids. Lena's more deliberate stride pressed deeper into the soil. They weren't rushing. They moved like they had all the time in the world. I kept my recorder running, whispering notes as I went. The air grew colder the deeper I followed, sharp enough to sting when I inhaled. Random fact. Some meteorologists argue that sudden localized temperature drops in forests are caused by changes in pressure and airflow through dense canopies. But my gut said this wasn't just science, it was deliberate. The tracks led me uphill, weaving through old pines until the terrain shifted into rockier ground. The soil thinned, making the trail harder to follow, but the limp made it easier. That dragging right foot left a distinct groove in the dirt. Second one-liner. If this guy ever tries to disappear, he's terrible at it unless he wants to be found. And then, the trail ended. Completely. The last set of prints, Lena's, the kids, the limp, stopped at a wide patch of bare earth, almost perfectly smooth like someone had swept it. No footprints beyond that point. No broken twigs. Nothing. I crouched low, scanning for any sign of movement. My recorder caught the sound of my own heartbeat. It was so quiet. Elder wisdom. Courtesy of my granddad. When tracks end too clean, it's because they didn't walk away. They were lifted. The thought sent a chill through me. Lifted by what I stood slowly scanning the tree line when I noticed something strange, small holes in the dirt, evenly spaced, almost like ladder rungs pressed into the soil. I looked up. The branches overhead were thick, interwoven, but one section looked disturbed. Pine needles, shifted, bark, scraped, fresh. They hadn't just vanished. They'd gone up. Third one-liner. Oh, great. Turns out the creeps are arboreal now. I swung my flashlight upward, but the canopy was dense. No movement, no sound, just endless layers of pine branches, each darker than the last. Then something shifted. Not loud, not obvious, just a faint sway in the upper branches, like weight moving carefully, deliberately. I held my breath, my recorder catching only the faint rustle. And then from somewhere high above, a voice drifted down. Soft, calm, familiar. Eli, Lena's voice. I froze, staring up into the dark green canopy, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw them. 7 shapes crouched along a massive branch, still as stone, all facing me. Then, like smoke, they melted back into the shadows. The forest went silent again, and that's when I realized they hadn't been running from me. They'd been practicing how to disappear, and they were very, very good at it. The last recording. I didn't move for a long time after they vanished into the canopy. My legs felt rooted to the spot, like stepping away would somehow provoke them. The forest had gone back to its unnatural stillness, but it wasn't the peaceful kind. It felt staged, like the quiet before an actor steps onto a darkened stage. One-liner. Nothing like being the only guy who didn't get the script for tonight's horror show. Finally, I backed away, slow and deliberate, keeping my eyes on the branches above. Nothing moved. Not a sound followed me as I retreated down the ridge trail toward the cabin. But I knew it wasn't over. By the time I got back, night had fallen. The cabin felt smaller than ever, the walls pressing in every creak of the wood sounding like a footstep. I sat at the table, recorder in hand, staring at it like it might have answers. Elder wisdom courtesy of Mrs. Rinaldi. When you know you're in too deep, tell someone before the water's over your head. So that's what I did. I hit record. This might be the last entry. I whispered, voice shaking. If anyone finds this, if anyone's listening, there are kids out there. They're alive. Or at least, they were today. 7 of them. Lena's leading them. She's not just hiding them. She's teaching them how to vanish. I paused, glancing at the window. A faint shape moved just outside the glass, but I kept talking, whispering faster now. They want me to follow. I know that now. Every step I've taken was part of their plan. The man with the limp, he's not in charge. Lena is, and she's different. Calm. Like she's waiting for me to figure something out before I froze. A soft tap against the window cut me off. One-liner 2. Nothing says you're screwed, like polite knocking from the woods. I stood slowly, heart hammering, glancing toward the window.
A small carved figure sat on the sill, now freshly placed. I stepped closer, breath catching when I saw it clearly. It was me. Crude, roughly carved but unmistakable short hair, the same jacket I was wearing now. And on its chest, scratched deep into the wood, one word: stay. I backed away, recorder still running. Random fact, because my brain won't stop throwing trivia even now. In some indigenous legends, carved figures were used to hold someone's spirit, keeping them from leaving until the figure was destroyed. Third one-liner. Guess I'm officially a collectible now. The knock came again, softer this time, almost patient. I swallowed hard, whispering into the recorder one last time. If I don't upload this, someone else do it. They're out there. They've been out there for longer than anyone realizes, and if they want me to stay, I don't think they plan on letting me leave. The doorknob rattled, my breath hitched, and then from outside, Lena's voice, calm and steady, like she was standing inches from the door. Eli, come with us. The recorder slipped from my hands, clattering against the floor. The last thing it caught before the battery died was my whisper. Okay. The forest is quiet now, softer, almost gentle, as if it's breathing evenly for the first time in days. Funny, isn't it? How silence can feel like safety when you stop fighting it. I don't know where we are exactly, somewhere deep enough that the roads feel like memories. The others, yes, the kids move around me in near silence, their bare feet leaving only the faintest impressions in the soft earth. They don't speak much, but when they do, it's always to her, to Lena. She walks ahead, calm, every step deliberate, as if she's walked these paths 1,000 times before. Maybe she has. Maybe she never left them. And me, I don't feel afraid anymore. Not exactly. There's a strange peace in letting go of the fight, in not trying to run from what's already caught you. The air smells different up here, cleaner, cooler. Somewhere in the distance, a stream hums softly, blending with the whisper of pine needles shifting overhead. The sound is almost hypnotic, like the low white noise I used to play to fall asleep. I think about the cabin sometimes, about the recorder I left behind. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe someone will listen. But I doubt they'll understand. Because out here, it doesn't feel like we've disappeared. It feels like we've changed. The kids don't look scared anymore. Even the man with the limp moves lighter now, almost grateful. And Lena, she glances back at me, sometimes that same calm smile playing at her lips, like she knows I've finally stopped resisting. The forest hums around us, warm in its silence, and for the first time since I arrived, I feel like I belong. Good night.